There's nothing like writing the first book in a series. It's full of excitement, discovery, and those wonderful moments when your characters finally come to life. But it's also full of lessons that you can only learn by doing. Now that book 1 in my Cosy Fantasy series is complete, I wanted to sit down and share a few of the biggest lessons that I learned along the way. Creatively, emotionally, and practically. My hope is that if you're writing your first book or dreaming about starting a series of your own, these reflections might encourage you to trust the process and embrace the magic of learning as you go. Hey, hi, hello, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Melanie and I write all things cozy. I think the very first thing I learned is that no matter how well you plan the story will always change. Characters surprise you, the world expands in unexpected ways, and themes appear that you didn't consciously plan. At first, that can feel a little scary, like you're losing control of your outline. But I've learned to see it as a good thing. It means the story has a life of its own. As an example, Esme's romance with Laris originally started out as a kind of slow burn enemies to lovers. However, I realised that the tone of enemies to lovers didn't really lend itself to the cozy fantasy vibe that I was going for. That's not to say it couldn't work at all in cozy fantasy, but for me, I knew it wasn't going to work. So I scrapped it and turned it into a sweet romance that leans very heavily into Esme and Laris's kind of shared identity. Learning to let go of perfection and follow the story's natural rhythm was one of the best lessons from this book. Sometimes the most beautiful details are the ones that appear when you stop forcing your own ideas and allow them just to come through more naturally and more intuitively. Cozy fantasy has its own kind of rhythm. Slower, softer, more character driven. I learned it takes real confidence to lean into that. When you're used to traditional storytelling advice about tension and stakes, it can feel strange to write scenes that simply breathe. I read a lot of craft books prior to starting my novel, and they all emphasize the things that need to be happening all of the time. The stakes must always be high, the romance must be epic, there must be moments of absolute despair. It was hard to say no to that, especially as this was my first fiction book, and craft books are obviously written by esteemed writers. But the moments between moments, the gentle details that make this world feel alive, that's what cozy fantasy is about. I realised that a cozy story doesn't need constant action to hold the reader's attention. It just needs heart and an atmosphere that feels like coming home. In the Lunar Quartz Library, you will find a lot of moments centered on making a cup of tea. And not just because I'm British. Whilst cozy fantasy needs some stakes, obviously, I wanted those problems to be addressed and solved in a cozy way, in between sips of tea and bites of brilberry buns, which is the baked good of choice in Quartz Falls, where my book is set. If you're thinking, what on earth is a brilberry bun? Think of it like a cinnamon bun, but filled with delicious, sweet and a little bit tart berries instead. If you fancy making your own to enjoy with a cup of tea whilst you read this book, you can get the recipe for free when you purchase it from whichever retailer you would like, because everyone likes a free gift with purchase, right? As the story deepened, I realised how important it is to really know my characters, not just their goals or their backstory, how they look, but their inner rhythms, how they speak, what comforts them, how they react under stress. When you are writing a series, you need to know them well enough that their voice feels consistent, even years later when you return to them in book 2, 3, 4 and beyond. Again, Laris, Esme's love interest, he started out kind of grumpy. Think Geralt of Rivia, the Henry Cavill edition. Whilst that could have worked in the context of a grumpy sunshine romance, it just didn't quite fit. So I lightened him up a bit and kept him a little mysterious instead, just to add another dimension to the romance. Keeping my story Bible, which is my notebook with quotes and traits and memories and all sorts of bits and bobs, that helped me to stay grounded in who these characters are. And it's something I will definitely be carrying forward into the next book. One of the biggest challenges I faced was figuring out how to write a satisfying standalone story while still planting those seeds for the rest of the series. You want the first book to feel complete, like readers could stop there and still feel fulfilled. But you also need enough open threads to make them eager for what's next. With the Lunar Quartz Library, the magic is probably the biggest ongoing element of the story. Each book will expand on the magic so that the challenge then is to ensure that enough is held back to maintain intrigue, but enough magic happens and evolves and changes to ensure it doesn't feel samey or repetitive throughout all of the books. I learned to think of it like gardening, planting bulbs now that will bloom later in the books. It has taught me patience and the value of subtlety when building a long-term story arc. Writing a book, especially the first in a series, requires a kind of gentle discipline, showing up for your story even on days when you don't feel inspired, but doing it in a kind way without forcing or punishing yourself. There were definitely days when I doubted everything, the pacing, the structure, even my ability to finish. But each time I came back to my desk with a cup of tea and the story was there and I would get on with something. But back in December 2024, when I was still working a part-time job outside the home, I was just so tired. I loved the story, but I just couldn't write it then. I took the entire month off, which definitely helped, but getting back into the story in January and kind of making that push to really get it finished with the first draft and edited was tough. That's the biggest lesson of all, that the magic doesn't come from grand moments of inspiration. It comes from showing up consistently, but gently, and trusting that every small step matters. Writing the first book in my series taught me so much, not just about storytelling, but about patience, creativity, and trust. I know the next book will come with its own lessons, but for now, I'm taking these with me as gentle reminders of how far I've come. If you're writing your first book or thinking about starting a series, I hope this video has encouraged you to follow through with your curiosity and to embrace the messy middle of your story and to be kind to yourself along the way. I'd love to hear what lessons you've learned from your writing journey. Let's chat in the comments down below. I always love hearing your reflections and what you have to say and what you have learned. Thank you so much for spending this cozy moment with me. If you enjoyed this video, I would love for you to hit the subscribe button. I upload a topic video like this every Tuesday and a behind the scenes of my writing vlog every Thursday. Bye.